Welcome back to Capitol Square.
Joining us now in studio to continue our Syria discussion, Congressman Steve Stivers from the 15th District. We thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
Be here.
So are you happy with this congressional vote on military action that it was postponed?
Well, I'm glad it was postponed only because I felt like it would have been a problem for the president to get the votes. Neither Republicans nor Democrats were lining up to support the president on this. And I think taking a step back, trying to build a broader strategy is smarter, because the first thing you need to start with is what's your outcome? What's your end state? And then I've been a military guy 28 years. The commander's job is to build an end state and then a strategy, and then figure out all the ways you can use your power to influence that strategy. Well, military action is just one of the elements of American power. There's diplomatic power, as we're now pursuing this diplomatic approach through Russia and the United Nations. There's economic power, there's information power. We have lots of elements of power. They should all be integrated into a plan. And frankly, 138 countries signed the Chemical Weapons Treaty of 1925 in Geneva. And to have one country enforce it just doesn't make sense. Even in Iraq, 49 countries on day one. Colin Powell had 49 countries in our coalition. This is an international treaty. We need an international response, whether it's diplomatic, whether it's just making statements condemning it, or whether it ultimately comes to military action. And it should be wrapped around a strategy to achieve the goal that the president says he wants, which is to not have chemical weapons used again.
What I find fascinating is that I think there are 16 members of Congress who served in either Iraq and Afghanistan. Only 2 went on record supporting this military strike. So I guess that leads to the question of, did we learn something? Did you learn something in Iraq that gives you more hesitation now as you look at Syria?
Well, we clearly learned in Afghanistan and Iraq to talk about the exit plan. That's one of my other requirements.
Which we did not have.
Which we never had in Afghanistan or Iraq. Afghanistan is now the longest running war in American history. And we need to talk about the exit plan up front. That's the other thing, that after you have a strategy, an end state and a strategy, then you got to talk about.
So you don't buy, the president
plan.
basically said, look, we're just gonna strike in and out, that it's not going to be Kosovo, that it's not going to be anything prolonged.
Sure, that's his plan. But then every action has an equal and opposite reaction. If we go in and do something, will somebody respond militarily? Will somebody respond in other ways? So that's the thing that needs to be talked through. So even when it looks like it's a quick action, there needs to be talk about what our exit plan is and how we make sure we get out. And that's why I think it's also important to have an international reaction to this, or response, not just an American response.
And so let's talk about some of the things that are going to play out here at home.
Yep.
We heard from Speaker John Boehner earlier and saying that he's supporting the Commander-in-Chief. How much pressure do you think you and others in the delegation are going to be getting?
I don't think we'll get much pressure because, I can tell you I've been there 3 years, and I can't think of one time when I got much pressure to vote a certain way. So, I represent 721,000 constituents, just like the Speaker does, and he needs to represent his constituents and do what he thinks is right, and I'll do what I think is right for our country. And I'd put my 28 years of military experience, my Army War College education, and my time as a chemical officer. I probably think I'm one of 2 members of Congress that was ever a chemical officer in the Army. I'd put that experience up against anybody for what we're facing here.
Let's ask the philosophical question. And I asked Senator Portman this same thing. But 10 years ago, Republicans were ready to go. Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. We're going in because that is unacceptable. Here we are 10 years later, and Republicans are saying, oh, let's slow down. How much of that is a change of philosophy, maybe this libertarian influence of Ron Paul finally, after 5 or 6 years, beginning to infiltrate the thinking of the Republican Party, or how much of this is just Barack Obama as Commander-in-Chief?
Well, I don't think it is Barack Obama as Commander-in-Chief, because both Republicans and Democrats are against this action. And I don't think it's the libertarian influence. Frankly, we have really 2 members, maybe 3 members of the 242 Republicans that I would consider libertarians. I think it goes back to your earlier question. We learned a few things after Iraq, and the other thing was, I do feel like in Iraq, like I said, Colin Powell had 49 countries as part of an international coalition. It was an international response. Now, America got left holding the bag over time as different countries dropped out.
This time we don't even have
This
Great
time
Britain.
we don't even have Great
Right.
Britain. We have a handful of countries. And, you know, like I said, 139 countries signed the Chemical Weapons Ban Treaty. Let's try to go to those countries and say, we need to talk about a bigger strategy of how we prevent chemical proliferation and how we prevent use of chemical weapons, and we need your help.
So then, with all of that said, I mean, what is the message about, from the action and the debate over this, what's the message to the other countries in the world, do you think?
Well, I think the message to the other countries in the world is America is going to try to have a thoughtful response to anything we do, and we're not going to use our military willy-nilly. We're going to make sure that we debate and discuss it. We're still, you know, one of the greatest republics in the world, and we debate and decide issues. It is important to note, though, that the War Powers Act gives the president 60 days to respond on his own to anything, and so he didn't have to come to Congress. He chose to come to Congress, and when you come to Congress, you get a debate.
Do you think that was a good idea for him to come to Congress?
I think it was his choice.
Congressman, let me ask you, Jim DeMint was here last month in Columbus talking about defunding Obamacare. As you look at Syria and this playing out over the next 30 days and add that to the mix, a potential government shutdown, I mean, what's going to be the prevailing issue here? I mean, is there a potential government shutdown coming?
Well,
a lot of Republicans would like to see
I
that.
will say I'm a co-sponsor of the Defund Obamacare resolution, but I do not support a government shutdown because a government shutdown defunds our Defense Department, puts our military soldiers and their families at risk. Checks could stop coming to some of our military families while their loved ones are deployed. It could result in delay of supplies and important materials. We're still a nation at war. And I do not support...
So you think DeMint is wrong on that?
I think he's very wrong. Tactically, I think he's wrong. We have the same goal, but I think he's tactically wrong. And frankly, if you defund the entire government, one of the only things funded at that point is Obamacare. And that's a fact.
Congressman Steve Stivers, always good to see you. Thanks for stopping in this
Thanks so
morning.
much.
Thank you.
Great to have you here. Well, what is the potential political fallout from Syria for Ohio's congressional delegation? We're going to ask D.C. Bureau Chief Jack Torrey from the Columbus Dispatch. That's when we come back.